Good afternoon, everyone. This is TJ Muehleman, founder and chief organizer person at Standard Co., here with another edition of our series, Data is Awesome, but managing data still kind of sucks. This week, we're going to talk about HIPAA and data governance. Now, hold on. I swear to God, this is interesting, and it's only about 10 minutes, so don't go anywhere. And I used a shitload of Giphies in this, so it's at least somewhat entertaining. But what we found over the years is that HIPAA is one of the most commonly misunderstood laws and regulations around. That's partly because it was written before the advent of cloud computing and really before the advent of the internet as we know it. It was written in 1996 by a bunch of old white guys who don't really understand technology. Sadly, not much has changed in Congress, but that's a story for another time. So we're going to do a layperson's approach to HIPAA, because if you Google HIPAA right now, you go read a bunch of articles that sound like a computer wrote it. It's impossible to understand. So I'm here to break it down and make it simple for you to consume. So what is HIPAA? It's one of those things that makes your brain kind of melt. But HIPAA is a federal law that governs how data is managed, stored, and preserved as it relates to health-related data and as it relates to personally identifiable information. And from our perspective, there's sort of four key components to HIPAA. There's an agreement, there's encryption, there's access control, and there's disclosure. We are not attorneys, so let me be very clear here. You should call an attorney if you're dealing with anything related to HIPAA, but we're basically correct here in terms of the way we lay HIPAA out and what it means. Before we get too deep in the weeds here on what HIPAA is, let's just do a quick explanation of some fancy words, fancy acronyms, I guess. HIPAA is Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which sounds very government-ish, but whatever. PHI and PII are more or less interchangeable. Private health information, personally identifiable information. They are things that help you describe who I am. So TJ Muehleman, my name, my date of birth, my social security number, my address, my phone number would all be described as PII or PHI because they can describe an individual TJ Muehleman. My gender, my height, my weight, those are not PII, only because there's a lot of people who are 6'5". I'm actually 6 foot tall. There's a lot of people who are 180 pounds. I'm really 240. And there's a lot of people who are males. I'm a male. So it just helps differentiate between things that sort of describe me and things that identify me. And last but not least, business associates agreement. So let's start with BAA. Okay. A BAA is a binding contract between two entities that basically says, I'm going to take real good care of this healthcare data for you. A practical example is I go into the doctor's office. I tell them a bunch of stuff about my health. The doctor puts that into a computer system. Well, that computer system is going to save it between the doctor and a data system like standard data. There is a BAA between those two entities, which kind of forms this legally binding contract of taking care of data. And it assumes liability. It puts liability onto the contractor or service provider's shoulders. So that's what a BAA is. So if you're just a patient, you're not really worried about a BAA. It's really sort of a back office thing. Encryption. Okay, so it's 2021. Everybody knows what encryption is. Encryption basically means I'm going to take data and I'm going to do some cool stuff to it so that a human eyeball can't really figure out what it is. Think of the Matrix when you see all those lines coming down the screen. That's encryption. Well, our interpretation of HIPAA basically says that there's kind of two levels of encryption when it comes to the data that you're sharing with a healthcare provider. The first is that when that data gets sent from the healthcare provider to the server, it's encrypted. That's called encryption in transit over the internet. If you ever look in your browser and you see HTTPS or you see a little lock, your data is being encrypted. Most data nowadays on the internet is encrypted. 20 years ago, that was very rarely the case. It was transmitted in plain text. So people could snoop in the middle and grab that content and read it. They cannot as easily now. The second level of encryption is on the hard drive. So when the data actually goes from the tablet or computer or whatever to the service provider's databases, like standard data, it's encrypted in the database. So that way, if some knucklehead gets into the database, they can't pull that data out very easily. It's encrypted. So there's the second component to HIPAA. The third, access control. Who can see the data? Our interpretation is that there are two levels of access control, software and hardware. Software means when I'm looking at patient data, do I, the user that's logged in, have access to view that data? And if I do, I need to unmask that data. We mask PII or PHI data in our system. But we can also basically say, no, you can't see the data at all. So through the software, we can control who sees the data. Hardware. Now, who has access through maybe a firewall or access to the database? Who can actually get to the underlying data systems? And more importantly, have they been trained? Have they gone through some sort of HIPAA compliance checklist to know how to preserve that data, how to back that data up, how to have like a disaster recovery program, that kind of stuff. So the access control kind of functions as both a who can see the data and who knows how to manage the data. All things that we do for our clients. And last but not least, the fourth component is disclosure. Okay, so we've all been to the doctor and you fill out one of those damn forms that we've all filled out 1,000 times. Well, one of those forms, almost always, is a HIPAA consent form, basically saying I consent to that this doctor might be able to share my data with another healthcare provider. Without that disclosure, without that signature, they are not legally allowed to share your HIPAA data with other people. So those are the four components, okay? BAA, encryption, access control, disclosure. There are other components to the law. We've all heard or seen that laws, when they get written, have like 1,000 pages. There's a bunch of different stuff, but these are the four key components to HIPAA. So the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about some common misunderstandings about HIPAA that I hear a lot. Okay, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's a representative from my home state of Georgia, and she's fucking crazy. We'll talk about that another time. But she recently said, if I ask you for your vaccination card, that's a HIPAA violation. Actually, it's not. You can ask people for PII or PHI. I can ask you what your blood type is. I can ask you what your social security number is. Those are not HIPAA violations. It would be a HIPAA violation if I shared that information as a healthcare provider with someone you did not consent for me to share it with. Think on that, Ms. Green. I can sue you for violating my HIPAA rights. That is incorrect. Very well, a poorly understood component of HIPAA is that there's actually not a civil protection under HIPAA. What that basically means is I can't sue you for violating my rights as a HIPAA, my HIPAA rights. So, for example, if my healthcare provider leaks all of my sensitive data without my consent, I do not have the legal means to sue the healthcare provider. The only person who can sue or bring about a lawsuit against the healthcare provider is the Health and Human Services Administration. So, nope, you can't sue somebody for a HIPAA violation. Sorry, I hope you weren't planning on getting rich doing that. Okay, so thanks for the HIPAA primer, TJ. What now? So you're probably asking yourself, what does this have to do with standard data? Well, we do HIPAA and HIPAA-like controls or work for our clients every single day. We work with some of the largest healthcare organizations in the world, like the World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. We work with ministries of health throughout sub-Saharan Africa and South America and South Asia. And we apply most of the same kinds of controls that you do through HIPAA to our own software by default. So we have audit controls, we have access controls, we have PII and mask personally identifiable information. We have training protocols for our team and for our clients. And we, as always, try to take the best care of our clients and customers' data as we possibly can. More importantly than even all of this, it's not even something that's part of HIPAA, is that the data that we gather belongs to our clients. It is not ours. We don't anonymize it. We don't resell it. We don't repackage it. We don't do analysis against it. It is our client's data. We're always very, very clear about that. In fact, it's in our contract. So if you're looking for a provider who won't sell your data and won't take advantage of you, call us. We're here. So as always, like, share, tell your friends, tell your friend who's a director general at Administrative Health in Africa about us. Who knows? But as always, I appreciate you tuning in, and check back next week. We'll talk about something else. I don't know what. We'll figure it out. If you have any ideas, let me know.